Good morning. How is the sound?
Great.
Are we good? All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Holmes. I'm with the Creation Justice Committee, and I'm a parish member. I want to first thank you all very much for being here today, and welcome to the season of creation. I want to welcome those that are in the room. I want to welcome those that are live streaming. Hello to all of you. And I also want to welcome those who may watch this recording in the future. We're really grateful that you're all here and that you brought your good energy into the room. Our speaker today really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyway. So today we have Father Daniel Griffith. He is the pastor and rector of the Basilica. He is also the Wenger Family Faculty Fellow of Law at St. Thomas School of Law, and he is a major proponent and scholar of restorative justice. The Basilica itself has a tradition of focusing on social justice. It's part and parcel of our Catholic faith and tradition, and that's in part the reason why our committee is named the Creation Justice Committee. I want to highlight the members of the committee really briefly. Raise your hand. All of you who are in the room, big thank you to everyone. And Janice, you should be raising thank you also. I would like to invite you at some point on your way out to please visit the table. You can leave your email address. We promise we will not spam you. And grab a card, because on the back of the card is a QR code that takes you to a lovely guide for the season of creation that has on it a whole host of activities that you can participate in throughout this month of season of creation. So Father Daniel, as I said, wonderful person, little tidbit, so just a little benefit to all of you that are in the room, you get to hear this. So he recently had a profile done on him, and it turns out his two biggest pet peeves, this is prime real estate, folks, two biggest pet peeves, weak coffee and people that drive slow in the fast lane. All right, without further ado, I want to pass it over to Father Daniel. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Father.
Rachel. Thank you. Just a big shout out, thank you to Rachel and our Creation Justice, right? Creation Justice team, which is such a great descriptor. Tell me if this is too loud. We can have, maybe just notch it. I have a voice that projects, so we'll just notch it down a little bit. How's that? Better? 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 Too loud? Maybe a few more notches. How's that? Okay. So, what is justice? Well, that's still a little loud. Okay. See, the thing is, these are different than the mics upstairs, so you get used to those. I don't want to break it. Okay, all right, fair enough. Okay, I think we're good, huh? Okay, so justice in the Hebrew scripture, the biblical definition of justice is right relationship with God and neighbor. And we are not presently in right relationship with the environment, with God, who is the author. Okay, I think we're good. Let's just leave it. We're good. So we are not presently, as Pope Francis teaches, in right relationship with the created order, and thus not in right relationship with God, who is the author of creation. We're not in right relationship, and I'll do a little bit of introduction before we get back into the Catholic foundations for care for creation, or Catholic foundations for environmental justice, because we're not leaving presently a planet to future generations that is habitable. We see a disproportionate effect on the poor, on those who have to flee their country of origin. Migration and the environment are closely aligned. So creation justice is a great description, because it really invites us, in fact, it exhorts us to enter back into right relationship with God and neighbor. Why don't we say a little prayer, and we'll begin and ask the Lord to be with us. Loving God, you are the source of creation. You are the source of all life. Be with us. Send your befriending spirit upon us. May we unite together to sustain your gifts, to sustain creation for future generations, with a special love for the poor and those who struggle, including through environmental degradation. In your name we pray. Amen. So just one heads up, I have a hard stop at about 12:15. So I'm gonna try to do the substantive part and then leave time for questions and answers, but we're gonna try to cover a fair amount of information and church teaching, but I really want to hear from everybody what you're thinking, what your thoughts are. And I thank you. It's a beautiful day. Thank you for being present here and for all your care for the environment. Laudato Si, Pope Francis's document, was promulgated in 2016. It was his first encyclical that he wrote. He finished an encyclical that had been started by his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI. And then in 2023, last year, on the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, he promulgated an apostolic exhortation, Laudato Deum. And he had to do that because the time between 2016 and 2023, there was not as much collective action toward environmental sustainability as there needed to be. It was another clarion call that, boy, we have work to do and we need to come together. One of the things that he also has called for is this season of creation. And I think very few places are taking this up, sadly. I know we're on tape here, but I think our archdiocese could do more here in St. Paul and Minneapolis. I'm proud of the Basilica to integrate this into our liturgical worship, our learning, our action. When he says that everything is connected in Laudato Si, well, also all of our actions, our heart, and our head also have to be connected and integrated, and including the liturgy that we celebrate as we do today. I do want to call out some wonderful programming. So we're starting our faith formation year, our adult faith formation year today, and then throughout these coming months, we have a lot of great opportunities, and I just want to highlight some of those. We're going to have 2 more talks in September on environmental stewardship and creation justice. Joe, I'm blanking on your last name, Joe. Fargione, he looks Italian, doesn't he? That's a good thing. Joe Fargione is going to speak, and we have another parishioner who's also writes for the Star Tribune, and he's also, where are you? All right, wonderful. And tell me your name again. Greg. Greg's going to also be one of our presenters, and we thank him for stepping up. One of the things that's so true about Basilica is the talent and commitment and generosity of our parishioners is unlike any place where I've been. It really is an extraordinary parish, and people really using their gifts to build up the community, and Joe and Greg are another couple of examples. Another example is Dr. Paul Voida, who remains a parishioner, even though he and his wife are about 2 hours north of here, and he still teaches at St. Thomas in the theology department. He's going to give a talk on the 13th of October on Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, the bishop's document. And his talk will be smart and very much immersed in the tradition, but also nuanced and hopefully helpful as you prepare to vote on the first Tuesday of November. We also have on the 27th of this month, Julie Craven and I head up our initiative on restorative justice and healing, as Rachel had mentioned, and we're going to have a special program, 1:30 to 4:30, on overcoming polarization in church and society. A keynote talk given by Father Aaron Westman, who wrote an award-winning book, The Church's Mission in a Polarized World. We'll have 2 panels. Our members of our advisory board are in town for a retreat and for this program, and so we'll have 2 panels and then a celebration. So if you're free on the 27th of September, come on out. October 3rd, we start a new lecture series in honor and memory of Reverend David Link, who was the founding dean of our law school here. He was longtime dean at Notre Dame Law School, and oh, by the way, his son, David Link, is a parishioner here and involved in many, many ministries. Susan Link is his spouse and our trustee. We're going to have Rob Vischer, who's president of St. Thomas, and Dean Marcus Cole, who's the Notre Dame Law School dean, and they'll be talking about value-based education toward hope and healing. And that will start off what will be, at this time, an annual lecture that will be here at the Basilica. So we're really excited about that. We have the Season of Hope beginning in December. We have more talks on the role of women. Both Janice and Sister Janet will be giving their reflections on the weekend prior, I think the 21st and 22nd. So we're excited about that. Janet Ryan is doing a training in restorative justice here that will be at the Basilica. So much going on. It's wonderful. Environmental stewardship and creation justice has been a topic I have taken up for a number of years in my Catholic Thought, Law, and Policy course, but also I had the opportunity to do a deep dive into this topic in preparation for a summer international law program in 2017. So we are connected, St. Thomas, with Pázmány Law School in Budapest, Hungary. And I was one of the first folks who were asked to go, and what they do is it's a number of students who are law students from all over the world, and they're mostly Catholic, coming from Catholic universities throughout the world. And we were taking up the topic of sustainability and law. And I was tasked with ethical considerations of sustainability through the Catholic tradition. And I literally taught an entire intensive day. So I had to teach an intro to Catholic social teaching, and then the church's teaching on the environment. I was so impressed with the group of students. I mean, they were really, really sharp. So after literally 8 or 9 hours, I gave them a 1-hour test. And I remember 2 women, one from Indonesia and one from Africa, who absolutely knocked their exams out of the park. I mean, it was just amazing. I'm like, how could you, obviously they were coming with a fair amount of their own education. And then I remember another student who couldn't get me his exam, so they were supposed to send the electronic version and email me. And he was from Ireland. And so there he was at happy hour. I bought him all a beer after this intensive time, and it was fun. And he was drinking a beer, and I'm like, hey. I said, where's that exam? He said, I'll do it after the beer. I'll send it to you. And I'm like, that's not how it works. So in any event, the women acquitted themselves very well. I'll never forget one of the exam answers. So the question was Donald Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Accords consistent with the global common good? And I'm not taking a swipe at the former president, but this is the answer, and I was amused by it. One student wrote and said, no, it is not consistent with the global common good, and oh, by the way, it will not make America great again. So in any event, prior to Catholic social teaching and really immersing myself in Catholic social teaching when I was a young man, I did not have a care for the environment. When I was in law school, I would even joke among some of my more progressive friends, and now I'm moved, much more to the center on these issues, that, I would joke that on Earth Day that I would leave a styrofoam cup out just to kind of, get under their skin. I now look back with some amount of shame at my lack of understanding, my ignorance. What Catholic social teaching does beautifully is it shows how all of these issues of justice are connected. They're connected beautifully. Father Phil Rask is here, and he was my seminary rector, and he now comes regularly and presides at Basilica. And he reminded me when I was talking about healing ministries at the 9:30 Mass, if you were there, that I left out all of the hospitals, all of the nuns whose orders did that incredible work of healing. There was a young woman today who just began her residency in pediatrics at the U of M. She got her medical degree from Indiana, and she was there with her parents. That work of healing that Pope Benedict XVI calls an opus proprium for the church, a task agreeable to the church. It's ubiquitous in the life of the church in an extraordinary way. And our care for creation and our commitment to creation justice is part of that. It's rightly ordering ourselves with God and our neighbor and the created order of the environment at the same time. So I think that's very, very important. Before delving into the topic at hand, the Catholic Foundations, I want to do just a little bit of work locating our topic within Catholic social teaching. And we can see how it fits and how those issues are connected. CST, or Catholic social teaching in its modern form, flows from the Church's omnipresent commitment to care for the soul and the body. I wrote on environmental stewardship for the Catholic Social Thought publication at Assumption Parish. And I talked about this conference I was at. So back in February, I was invited. It's called The Way Forward, and it was the third iteration where they bring bishops and lay leaders and scholars and priests together from all over the country. It's about 100 plus people. I was kind of surprised that I was invited, but I enjoyed it. I was out in San Diego in February, not a bad place to be. And I was so moved by the tradition. It's Chatham House rules, so we can't attribute the comments to particular individuals. But there was an extraordinary young theologian who was up at St. John's for a while, and now she's on the East Coast, and an ethicist. Just extraordinary. And she said, what is called forth from us is both humility and responsibility when it comes to creation. And Pope Benedict, in his Caritas in Veritate, says the created order was prior to us, but then it was given to us to be stewarded and to be kept for future generations, to be made fruitful, but with great respect. And one thing she said is, we have more in common with elephants than we do with God. She said that should engender and call forth humility. She said from a genetic standpoint. And so the awe that we should have for creation, but that sense of humility, wonder, and also responsibility. The incarnation is so important in terms of our Catholic teaching and Christian teaching. And Pope Benedict XVI said in Deus Caritas Est that the Church has a threefold mission: to proclaim the gospel and to teach, to celebrate the sacraments, with the liturgy being at the heart, liturgia, kerygma, and what's the last one, which Father Phil was mentioning, caritas, the ministry of charity and justice that has been throughout the Church as an opus proprium for 2 millennia. And what's great about the saints is they teach us that the word, the sacrament, and care for the poor and marginalized and for the environment is how we're to live our lives. I love the fact that Pope Francis highlights the central role of the beloved Saint Francis of Assisi, who had a prelapsarian relationship with creation. Just complete harmony in a way that was preternatural and extraordinary, seeing the connection of all things in really a mystical way. Now, are birds going to be landing on my shoulders? No. Am I going to be able to talk down the wolf from devouring people? Now, this is in the tradition, right? We don't know exactly how it happened. We don't know exactly how Mary's house got to Turkey, but these are some of the things we believe in our tradition. So in any event, what happens in 1891, modern Catholic social teaching begins with Rerum Novarum on New Things by Pope Leo XIII. And what's happening? The Church is reaching out with her teachings because we have what are on the new things to which he refers, the Industrial Revolution. Concerns about labor and capital, concerns about the dignity of workers. We're certainly mindful, he was mindful of all the immigrants who were migrating from all over the world. And so he starts the beginning of what is referred to as modern Catholic social teaching. And it has come up all the way, the last encyclical being Fratelli Tutti by Pope Francis. Laudato Si on the environment was his first encyclical, and it is also part of the corpus of Catholic social teaching. And it's really, and I'll get into this more in a few minutes, really telling that his first major encyclical is on the environment, written ahead of the Paris Accords to try to galvanize support. So many secular leaders have read this document and have remarked about the leadership of Pope Francis and how on spot he was in this area, and his prophetic voice as well. One of the things that he talks about is collective sustainability, cultural sustainability. There's a great paragraph, I think it might be 115, I'll try to get this when we put up the talk and disseminate it. But he says, we need sustainability in all areas, ecological, human, everything's connected, sustainability for the earth, sustainability for culture. And I gave I think it was one of our anniversaries at Our Lady of Lourdes, and I was getting on a plane that night to go to this conference, so I was very much immersed in this teaching. And we were battling a 30-story building that was supposed to be put up by Our Lady of Lourdes. Lourdes, where Father John is in the heart of the first neighborhood in Minneapolis, St. Anthony Village, right by the river. And so they wanted to build this 30, and it would have dwarfed the church. And so we battled and won. You know, we're not gloating, but there's a lovely 6-story building, which is right-sized. But I pointed to this passage where Pope Francis says those cultural landmarks need to be preserved and honored. And what are we doing here? That's what we're trying to do with the restoration of the church and the sustainability of our building for future generations, doing the envelope work, sealing up the church, restoring it to its beauty. Johann talks about this often. You know, the stone and all of that needs to be preserved and restored so that this cultural icon and house of worship can continue to be the center along other things of this neighborhood as well. What does Catholic social teaching try to do? And then I'll move to the topic at hand. It seeks through objective principles that are perennial to foster a more just and human social order. That's the primary aim of Catholic social teaching. You know, you have dignity of the human person, common good, preferential option for the poor, solidarity, subsidiarity, care for creation is one of the 7 that the U.S. bishops have as the fundamental principles. And it really invites us to a consistent life ethic in seeing the issues across the board, how they relate to each other. And that is one of the aims. The other aim is to promote human and collective flourishing, the flourishing of human persons and the flourishing of families and societies and churches and nations, that we would flourish and that we would intricately develop. The development of people, the development of culture and societies. That is really the aim of Catholic social teaching. And it also is called to be prophetic, to name harm, to name structures of sin, to name the dignity of people, and it has that special care for those who are marginalized. So Catholic social teaching is just a gift. And so when Pope Francis promulgated this encyclical, the neocons in the church, the neoconservatives who we'll say it, are ideologues. So what's an ideologue? An ideologue is somebody who, rather than take information as it is, filters it through a closed system. It's an ideological bunker. And so you don't receive information as it is, but rather you filter it and then you see it as bad because it doesn't fit into your worldview. Now, liberals can do that too, and I suppose centrists can as well, so we got to be on watch for that. They were already ahead of the promulgation of this document. You know, that this is going to be, I forget what they were calling it. Care for creation and the fact that people of faith, including non-Christian believers, and Christians have come together, frankly, past where they should have been, right? It should have been a long time ago, is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful development that Christians of faith are saying, we have a care and a duty to care for the environment. That this is biblical teaching. It's also an existential issue. So a final point before I get into the particulars of the teaching. I wrote this thing for Catholic, the Social Thought Journal at Assumption, and I got one email response, and it was a person who said I don't think she was enamored with my article. And what I did in the article is I connected consumerism, materialism, migration, the environmental degradation as all part of the same constellation of issues, which I absolutely believe that to be the case. They're all connected. And she said that Pope Francis doesn't care about the care of souls. And so when I hear that, I'm thinking, all right, that's an ideological bunker, because of course he does. He cares desperately for the salvation of souls. He's a pope. But, right, we're incarnational. Jesus was fully God and fully human. We're in this world hoping to be pilgrims who arrive in heaven, but the church cares deeply for soul and body. It cares for the material goods of people. It cares when injustice is visited upon them, and that when our drive to amass more and more, this throwaway society, leads to degradation of all types. So the both and, the Catholic both and, that it's body and soul, I preached on this a couple weeks ago, is really important. I should have answered her, now you know it's a woman, it does matter. I would normally expect that from a guy, but in any event, I did not send a response. I can still do that, and I would do it in charity, but in any event, that's what we're kind of battling up against, is that kind of that opposition to certain teachings that may not fit into our already held political views. As I said, I'm very heartened over the past several years that people of faith and Christians have reached a strong consensus on that part of the fidelity to God, part of our response to God, includes environmental stewardship. I mentioned Pope Benedict XVI. So Laudato Si is a great document. It's wonderful. It's really well done. You may not, and I mentioned this on a blog with Joe and Rachel, it's a bit ponderous, with all due respect to the Pope and the others who wrote it. If you want to read a 100-page encyclical, go for it. If you want the Cliff Note version, which preceded it, I'm going to turn you to Caritas in Veritate, sections 48 through 52. This is what I give my law students. I also have them read part of the encyclical from Pope Francis, the first couple of chapters. So this is Pope Benedict, and he connects all of the issues that Francis also talks about, but he does it in a shorter little chunk, 48 through 52. One of the things he says in Caritatis Veritate is the vast internal spiritual deserts have manifested themselves in the vast deserts in terms of environmental degradation. That what we're dealing with are interior realities. And if we're not, as spiritual beings rightly ordered to God, we will consume more and more. We will fixate on this world, and it leads to all manner of chaos. The other thing that Pope Benedict does that Francis picks up on is intergenerational solidarity and justice. That we are called not only to be in right relationship with people here in this world, but also to be in right relationship with the generations to come. We have a duty to hand on an environment that is habitable. And so one of the things that's amazing is you see great continuity between Paul VI, John Paul II, Pope Benedict, and Francis on the environment. There's almost really no daylight between them. And you see that. Paul VI, and I'll get to his comment in a few minutes, in 1971, that was the year I was born, he was already prophetically pointing to environmental degradation and what would come if we did not repair our relationship with the environment, with the earth, and see its inherent dignity. Julie and I, as I mentioned, do the work of restorative justice. One of the things I'd love to write with the spare time that I have is an article on restorative justice and environmental justice. Because I think one of the things that we're moved by in the heart, and then eventually the head follows, or it could be the head and then the heart, are stories. If we heard stories about how people are affected, and it's usually the folks who are poor and on the margins, where they don't have drinking water, they don't have electricity, they don't have other things that are part of human flourishing, and the ripple effects of that increase and get worse and worse. I think stories help us not only become enlightened, but also move us to start to repair the harm, which is what Pope Francis calls us to. Okay, digging into the Church's teaching, the ultimate norm of Catholic theology and social ethics is Scripture. So there's 4 sources of Catholic social teaching: Scripture, the tradition, the teachings of the Church, the lives of the saints, natural law, and experience. All 4 of those sources should move us to understand that we're at a place of peril with regard to the environment and sustainability and justice. And so where does Francis begin? With Genesis. In Genesis 2:15, we hear these words: "The Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till and to keep it." To till the land, to make it fruitful, and to keep it. Now, what happens after the fall? The tilling of the land becomes more burdensome. There's toil that is part of it. But to till and to keep it. So one of the problems that we had, so we begin with Scripture, is for many, many centuries, Christians approached this issue that being gifted the environment meant to use it without care, to despoil it, to disrupt it, to use it in a way that would be consistent with what Pope Benedict calls anthropocentric view of the world, that we're at the center of creation and we can do with the earth as we like. A lot of Christians believed in that, and it led us to further harm. But to till the earth and to keep it means that we're called to act with stewardship, to be good stewards of the gift of creation. Creation is a gift from God, which is inherently good. God entrusts this gift to humanity to be used responsibly in a way that can be passed on to future generations. Responsible stewardship of the earth is the standard for Catholic teaching on the environment. So here's the positive thing. Because of the teaching on the environment, and I still struggle in some ways, my lifestyle is much more mindful of my duty than it was when I was jokingly leaving styrofoam cups outside. In terms of turning off the lights, it does drive me insane how many lights are on in our parish office, and I'll go around turning them off. I'm kind of like my dad, who used to he would drive home at work. I think he was thinking more about the electric bill than the environment, but he would say, "My God, it looks like the electric company." The house would be lit up, and he's going, after he's been at work all day. The car I drive is influenced by the environment, how long I take a shower, those sorts of things. I still have a long ways to go. One of the things that I really struggle with are those plastic bags. So help me, Environmental Justice Committee. Rachel gives me a look here, and so I've got some room to grow, and we all do, but Pope Benedict and Pope Francis call for an ecological conversion, a conversion of lifestyle, rather than just to think about our actions, the food we waste, the water we use, the plastic we use, all sorts of things, the gas we use. Can we in all of our areas of our life be more intentional? And I said this is an existential issue. We are seeing some of the hottest summers back to back that we have. There is an increase that is going beyond what scientists have thought. It sounds like there is still a window of time, but we are seeing a rapid increase in global warming. Pope Francis absolutely unequivocally in Laudato Si links this to the human connection in terms of greenhouse gases and global warming. And the scientists have backed that up. I don't know how people do the mental gymnastics to not believe that, but our Pope, who was a scientist, that was his first area of education, and he thinks like a scientist and a theologian. They're not opposed, right? Faith and reason. Somebody once said, if you're opposed to faith and reason, you're either a bad theologian or a bad scientist. I think there's some truth to that. And I'm also in that camp. I mean, we've got to have eyes wide open. That experiential part of Catholic social teaching leads us to read the signs of the times with openness. And it was Pope Francis's experience with his South American bishops, recounted beautifully in, who's his biographer, Francis's main biographer, Austin Ibarre. In his second book, he tells the story, and I have my law students read this. The chapter recounts how Francis had a conversion with regard to the environment, and it was through the experience of his brother bishops in South America, the ones in Brazil and other parts, who really were experiencing this, the rapid degradation of the environment. Okay, I want to touch on 10 themes that I've seen in terms of the environmental teaching throughout papal encyclicals, Episcopal conferences, really not our Episcopal conference, but it's the Episcopal conferences closer to the threat of environmental harm. Ours should be. And I will say this to the bishops of the United States: embrace your call to leadership. This has not been an issue that has gotten nearly enough attention from the bishops of the United States. It's a failure of leadership. And again, I worry that ideology is skewing the need to speak out as church leaders about how important this issue. I'm waiting for the right biblical text where I'll preach a teaching homily here on a Sunday, but I can't force it maybe when we get to Genesis or other texts where it's clear that we can talk about that. But the bishops need to step up. And so do priests. So here are the themes that I saw. Creation is good in itself because it's sourced in God. Creation comes from God, right? God is the author and source of all creation. And God says it is good, right? In Genesis, all that I have created is good. Human beings are called by God to responsible stewardship of creation, to till and to keep it for future generations. That is our call, environmental stewardship. Number 3, as Pope Francis says repeatedly in Laudato Si, everything is connected. And his beautiful ecology, right? That it's the ecology of life, it's the ecology of nature, it's the ecology of all of creation, it's the ecology of culture. All of that is connected. And that's such a beautiful part of Laudato Si. Pope Benedict says in Caritas in Veritate, on the same point, number 3, the book of creation is one and indivisible. The answer to our present situation is to teach, but even more importantly, to live integral ecology, to live it, as challenging as that can be. Number 4, the environment is a collective good and pertains to our human dignity. It is a collective good that is a common good for all. Thus, Pope Francis teaches there is a natural right to the environment, to a habitable environment. It's a natural right. It's not given by the government. It attends to our human nature because it is connected to our own dignity and our human flourishing. There is a right to the environment. Have you ever seen this young woman? She in Sweden. She's a young leader on environmental. I can't think of her name if you remember it. Yes, there's a great. She was somewhere where President Trump, I can't remember, and the look she shot him, was just like priceless. She believes, and young people believe, and are out front, that there is a right to the environment, Do we live that way? Do we say that as Catholics? Number 5, in looking at the environment, it is important to avoid the extremes of anthropocentric tyranny and neo-pantheism. This is from Pope Benedict. He always loves to kind of have the extremes and then to come in between. So the extreme is, I talked about the tyranny of anthropocentric, is that we're the human, we're the crown of creation and we can use it as we will, and no matter if it's on to degradation. That is one extreme. Well, what is neo-pantheism? It's that God is creation. God is the source and creator of creation. We can look at creation and see the beauty of God, but creation itself is not immediately akin to God. There's a distinction, and I think both are important. Number 6, the human person is the crown of creation. As we heard 2 weeks ago, the first fruits, maybe not temporally in time, but in terms of why do we say we're the crown of creation? We have reason, we're made in God's image and likeness. We also have faith, the gift of faith. Now, could we get to heaven and say, wow, we didn't know, like St. Francis, that all of creation praises God. And so how that all works is really a mystery. But we are the crown of creation, and with our reason, we're called to use the earth in a way that's sustainable. Number 7, when examining environmental degradation, the church has a special concern for the poor and marginalized, as they are often disproportionately affected by an uninhabitable environment. Or corporate practices. Globalization and corporate practices that want to get in, and everything is about profit and maximizing shareholder value, and whatever happens to the environment and whether it forces people to migrate and leave their families, we're all about the bottom line, and that bottom line is profit and value, shareholder value, and then we just keep churning along, because that's all connected too, in a bad way, right? Selfishness and greed and materialism and disregard. So there's been some growth among companies in some good ways, but there needs to be more. Number 8, in our work to protect the environment and preserve it, and I'll be done in just a few minutes and we'll open it up for questions. In our work to protect the environment and preserve it, we must get at the root causes of its misuse: selfishness, greed, the deified market. The overall moral tenor of society is relevant to the future of the environment. Number 9, intergenerational solidarity and justice, creation justice, if you will, commits us to a duty to sustain and preserve the environment for future generations. And number 10, practical wisdom encourages both ethical reflection to accompany progress and development, and requires juridical teeth. This is what they wanted in the Paris Accords and the subsequent convenings, is that we're committing to action. If they're just platitudes without juridical backing, which is part of Laudato Si, that is not going to do the trick. So those were the 10 themes that in all of the research I did were most present. Part of the vision of the Second Vatican Council was for the church to read the signs and times and to respond in new and relevant ways with the perennial truth of Jesus Christ. Just 3 months after I was born, on the 80th anniversary of the threat and consequences, the 80th anniversary of 1971 was of Rerum Novarum. So you would see like 20 or 40 years after, the popes would honor that beginning of Catholic social teaching, modern Catholic social teaching, with a document of their own. And this was 1971, and this is what Paul VI. Now, this guy was really ahead of his time in a lot of ways. This is what he says: humanity is suddenly becoming aware that by an ill-considered exploitation of nature, we risk destroying it and becoming in turn the victim of our own degradation. Each pope then has consistently and prophetically called us to environmental justice. What I want to do is end by the themes that I see in Deus Caritas, I've got to find it in Laudato Si, because this is the most significant teaching from Pope Francis. Give me 1 second, I've got to find it here, and then I'll open it up. And this is the line from Benedict XVI. Benedict said it best when he says, the external deserts are growing because the internal deserts are so vast. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, here are the major themes of the encyclical. One of the questions in our remaining 10, 15 minutes that I want to hear from you, and whatever is on your mind, and I don't say this with pride, like this group gets it, our creation justice group gets it, I do think you get it. How do we move the needle for other folks who just don't, maybe their lifestyle is not in accord with environmental stewardship, or maybe they think it's all a hoax, global warming is a hoax. How do we broaden the message and really try to open this up in a way that's important? So I'll read these themes, and then I'm going to end with a little provocative comment as well, and I saved it for the end so you wouldn't stop listening when you heard it earlier. Number one, in the introduction and chapter 1, Pope Francis issues, this is one of the themes here, he issues an urgent plea to heed the warnings of environmental degradation before it's too late. He laments the throwaway culture and the loss of creation and biodiversity. He notes the lack of water for many and economic inequality which affects so many. He also focuses on the rapid global change and the breakdown of society. The path for creation and for human life is not sustainable, concludes the Pope in that first chapter. One of the things that he does in Catholic social teaching, and I see in restorative justice, is the first thing you have to do is name the sin, name the harm, name the problem. You got to confront it face on. And that leads you, hopefully, to movement of heart, movement of mind, resolute determination to repair the harm. But first of all, you've got to name it. And in some cases, we got to take our heads out of the burning hot sand. In chapter 2, Francis presents church teaching on the environment, noting again that everything is connected in a universal communion, and that creation is dependent on its different facets. I just saw that yesterday on my deck. So there was a spider that was a big spider, and it was moving around the deck, and I felt like it was like just toying with me. It had been in here, and then it moved, and then I was preparing for the talk. I was preparing my homily, and all of a sudden I see this bird flapping its wings, and it ended up taking out the spider, and I thought, well, okay, that's Pope Francis. Everything's connected. Number 3, in chapter 3, Francis bluntly asserts that we as humans are to blame for the ecological crisis. We have selfishly used the earth and have not prudently developed the earth in a way that is sustainable. And remember, progress and development ethics have to accompany that. Many people think that we're just going to find a scientific fix out of the mess. That's hubris. That is not going to do it. Number 4, the response to the ecological crisis is an ecology that is integral and thus sustainable. When he speaks of our environment, Francis is putting forth an integrated vision, natural, economic, social, cultural, and daily life. He employs here that we must attend to the good common to all, including the right to an environment, which is a collective good, which includes the environment and must commit us to solidarity for future generations. And number 5, finally, in the remaining 2 chapters, Francis calls people of goodwill to enter into dialogue and action in the international community, including the juridical framework that reduces greenhouse gases, promotes renewable energy, and helps poorer countries develop in a sustainable manner. And what's interesting is we believe in subsidiarity, that problems should be solved on the lowest level possible for it to be solved. Well, why do you need an international? Because this is an international issue. This has to be solved not only locally, nationally, but also internationally. And I want to connect to one quote from Francis as well in the encyclical. So one of the things that I hope that, give me 1 second here, that Paul Voida will do when he talks about forming consciences for faithful citizenship, to talk about the fact that all of these issues of life are connected. And I just want this quote here. This is one quote from Laudato Si. In the face of the so-called culture of death, the family is the heart of culture and the culture of life. In the family, we first learn how to show love and respect for all life. Give me 1 second. Okay, this is what he says. So keep an open mind, and I'm not talking about politics. I'm just talking about the church's teaching on life. This is Pope Francis from Laudato Si 120. Since everything is interrelated, concern for the protection of nature is also incompatible with the justification of abortion. How can we genuinely teach the importance of concern for other vulnerable beings, however troublesome or inconvenient they may be, if we fail to protect a human embryo, even when its presence is uncomfortable and creates difficulties? What the church has consistently taught, and it challenges us when we look at things from a political or, in some cases, ideological prism, is all of creation is connected, all of life is connected, human life and its dignity, whatever its stage, has a natural right. And so our care for creation extends to our care for the poor, our care for life in the womb. This is the teaching of the church. So what I want to do is open it up. We've got some time here. I appreciate I threw a lot at you. Some of you already know some of this. It's a beautiful teaching on the environment, and I'm proud of our leaders, really proud of our Justice Creation Committee for their work. But just what's on your minds? Any questions, thoughts, challenges?
I do agree that sustainability as we live is highly compromised. However, I do believe that the current political approach will lead the exact opposite of what we want to achieve.
Okay.
And you see it happening in Paris. So you mentioned the Paris Agreement, the COP21. Mm-hmm. So what happened is the mayor of Paris managed to double the number of traffic jam in 5 years, meaning that if you have a leak in your faucet at home, instead of having to spend $50 to pay for it, the numbers are bogus. You have to pay about $300 because you have to pay the plumber to sit in traffic jam. And many plumbers refuse to do any job inside downtown Paris. Number two, they put bike lanes everywhere. So what has been happening since the Olympics is that the Parisians are throwing nails on every bike lane to protect the restriction of cars. Whereas the solution should have been to maximize the number of electrical cars. Now you mentioned plastic bag. I happen to work for Whole Food Market. So Whole Food Market has a beautiful sign in every store that they removed plastic bag years ago. I can't remember. Great. What does that mean? Is that when a store needed 1 pallet of plastic bag per week, now you need 5 pallets of paper bags per week. So the only thing that has been done is to shovel the pollution from one point to the next. And we saw it even more with yogurts. You know, those little things you like, we love dairy. With the environmentalist people, wonderful. We're gonna use glass jar. The problem with a glass jar is a yogurt, about 60 to 70% of the gross weight goes to the glass and the rest to the yogurt. And we saw it when Ukraine was invaded and suddenly the cost of gas skyrocketed because it took most of the producer of yogurt using glass jar for the environment to switch back to plastic. Why? Because a plastic container for the gross weight is only about 5% of the things. So in your truck, and for Whole Food Market, there is 8 of them in town. Every food comes from Chicago. That's where the warehouse, not Super Value. So what it means is on a truck, on an 18-wheeler, and again, I'm giving a bogus number, when with glass jar you put, let's say, 10,000 yogurt, suddenly you can put 25,000, meaning that you reduce the cost, you reduce the energy. So for plastic, the solution is not to prohibit them, is to find solution and research in order to make sure that you can recycle them and you do something and not have, the Atlantic and the Pacific becoming the dumping site of plastic bags.
I do want to leave a little time for other comments.
And then the
questions.
last thing is that the current approach doesn't take into consideration the exponential growth of the world population.
Oh, okay. Well, Francis talks about that. Francis deals with that last one head on and says the problem is hoarding and some people take more than they need, and he decidedly says it is not population growth which is at the heart of the issue, but rather our lifestyles and the fact that we do not share what we have. I know John has a question, but thank you, Pierre.
I have an observation and a request, I guess. I think Pierre expresses very well what a great deal of us grapple with. I think deeply about the environment and what impact can I have. I do walk around and turn the lights off, and I wash out my plastic bags and I set them there, right? Because I feel like that's what I can do,
Yeah.
right? And I also have a great appreciation for migration and all the rest of those things. You pray about them, you worry about them, and that's part of your life. But I think as a centrist parishioner, the thing I take away most is what I can do today for my neighbor next to me and how I can share that truth about whatever that is, a moment of compassion. So hearing that from the church is a really powerful thing that, you know what, I'm doing okay. I turned my lights off. In fact, before I left today, I walked around the apartment, I turned my lights off.
Right.
And God in some way
And I'm going to start washing out
values it.
my bags.
That's right. So that's my observation is the church continues to treat, I can't solve the problem that Pierre has. I have spent a lot of time trying to sort through that. But I think I can solve the fact that you're my neighbor and I can help you. Mm-hmm. I can find that individual that's in the street and help them in some way, right? Maybe I can impact with my coworkers and my employees on the housing that they have, right? And the choices they have based on the wages that I provide, right? All of those kinds of little tiny decisions, I think, are more comprehensible to me. And that's what I would like to hear from, and I am hearing, thanks to you, from our church.
Yeah.
And I think that's the powerful piece that I take away from these things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, John. And the justice, environmental justice, creation justice committee is going to help Basilica do that, including our restoration project. Doug Craven's on a committee on the logistics side, and we're going to really do everything we can to make sure that our process of restoring the church is as in accord with, those practices. I am going to admit to something. I messed up, and when I thought we were going to start at 11, so I actually made a reservation because we're celebrating our 3rd anniversary of our initiative for brunch at 12:30, because I thought I would have an hour and 15 minutes and I wouldn't rush and all that stuff. So maybe we could, and if you guys want to continue dialogue, and I'm not trying to be a bad pastor and hit the road, but in any event, I thank you all for being here. I thank you for your passion, for your thoughts, And these are complex problems, you know, and it does take the lifestyle conversion. And I look forward to our two speakers who will be coming, Craig, not Greg. Okay, with a G, Greg. Greg and Joe. And I again thank